Hello, welcome to the AppleInsider Podcast. I'm William Gallagher. Our sponsor this week is 1Password. I so like 1Password. And normally, this is when I would tell you that I'm joined by Wes Hilliard because, normally, this is when I would ask Wes how he's doing. It's just, I'm not entirely sure I dare this time because as we record this, I think Wes will have maybe just about started getting over the claim that Apple has cut production of the Apple Vision Pro, only to hear in the last moments that Minecraft is ditching Apple's headset as well. Wes, you're not an Apple Vision Pro fanboy, but you are a fan. Are you okay over there?
Well, to be fair, Minecraft never arrived on Vision Pro, so it's...
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Right.
they did declare that they're no longer supporting VR headsets, meaning Oculus and PlayStation VR. But that does mean we will never get the Minecraft VR experience on Apple Vision Pro. But I still hope that one day we will get the iPad app, because that would still be excellent on Apple Vision Pro.
Okay. I'm just thinking we could say to them, you didn't even try? No. Okay. Right. Well, so actually you're better than I thought you were. I was concerned for you there.
Yeah, knowing Microsoft, they won't do it because when I asked them why they didn't put the Bedrock Edition on Apple TV, they said the platform was too small and they didn't feel like supporting it. So I feel like it's even more amplified a reason on Apple Vision Pro. If you listen to the people on the internet, no one owns one. No one's using them.
I remember when, so this is a sidestep. So iPad, Microsoft, it seemed when the iPad came out that Microsoft made a conscious decision not to put Office on it because they didn't want anybody to buy iPads. They wanted them to buy Windows machines. And then after a bit, people, not only did they start finding alternatives to Office on the iPad, but they found that they liked them.
Right.
So they started buying them on the Mac. And now Microsoft's share has gone down from everybody to just most people on these things. And then eventually they came around. What I learned recently from the Acquired podcast is that actually Microsoft worked on the iPad right away. They had the software ready to go, and then it was a marketing decision not to put it out. So the stories appear to be true, but no wonder they turned it around quickly. And actually it's very good on the iPad. Perhaps they will do the same thing. Perhaps even now, secretly, a team is working. Yeah. Speaking, just a quick aside from an aside, speaking about things in the future, we now have the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max. We have the iPad Pro. We have all sorts of things. We have the Apple Vision Pro. That's probably it, isn't it? Apple Insider Plus has got to be this week about how it's over for Apple. There is nothing else to do. They've reached the end of the road. Peak iPhone. It's over. And what do we think about that? But that's for Apple Insider Plus, which is the kind of extra bit for paid subscribers. If you are already a paid subscriber, you might have your own thoughts about this, but we have a few to say later on. And if you're not a paid subscriber, then do join us. It'd be great to have you. You can join us through Apple Insider's own Patreon page or through the Apple Podcast subscription service. But anyway, that's Apple Insider Plus, and that's later. For now, let's actually just step back a bit to that thing I kind of threw away there about the Vision Pro being stopped dead, that the factory has been told to turn out the lights, it's all over. Wes, I actually know you know more about this than I do. Is it as bleak as that?
Well, this is always fun. So if you've been listening to the show long enough, you know that it's clockwork. Analysts love it. When a new product comes out, the weeks leading up to the new product, Apple is ramping up production. They're making as many as they can make. They're selling as many as they're making. The same is true for almost every product, including the Vision Pro. I know it's hard to believe, but Apple, for at least the first few weeks, was selling every Apple Vision Pro that they were making. I understand there was a lot of store inventory, but it did move. And over the last few months, there may have been less sales and more inventory, but Apple still wanted to improve its inventory balance over time until now. So here we are, 8 months into Apple Vision Pro, probably a year into its production cycle, and they're slowing down. Why? Is it because Apple Vision Pro is dead? Apple doesn't care about it anymore? They've given up? No. This is the same thing they do with every product. It happens at different times based on supply and demand metrics, but given the very small demand, but also very small to supply for Apple Vision Pro. It took a lot of time for this to happen. What they're doing is they're slowing down. They don't need to make any more. The Apple Vision Pro is what it's going to be for the next 2 years. They've got as many as they need in inventory, and over the next 6 months to a year, they're going to sell out that inventory until it's gone, and possibly the end of next year or early spring 26, we'll see that new Vision, well, not even Vision Pro, but the Vision cheap headset come out, and that will replace this one entirely, and the inventory that we have of the Vision Pro will slowly dwindle until it's replaced by a Vision Pro 2, possibly end of 26, early 27. So this is just how supply chains work. They slow down. It's not a death knell for the Vision Pro. It's not a bad sign. The same hour this report about Vision Pro came out, Ming-Chi Kuo came out with a sad siren song for the iPhone 16, talking about how Apple was cutting back production by some millions of units, and it's this tragedy of Apple intelligence, and no one wants an iPhone 16, which is just not substantiated in actual life. The people are buying these things in droves. Apple Store employees are reporting the normal general sales. They're not returning them at any faster rate. It's the same as every year, and we're going to hear a record-breaking quarter surely on October 31st. So it's just a tale as old as time, but now we're applying it to Apple Vision Pro, and yes, it's very silly. There's nothing wrong with the Vision Pro. Apple is selling it the way that they want to sell it, and we're hearing a lot of very different commentary from Apple executives on this headset.
I read that Ming-Chi Kuo blog post he wrote. I should say, I used to quite rate Ming-Chi Kuo, as he had, it seemed like very good sources in the supply chain industry. And I think he still does. But over the last year, maybe, when he puts something out, it's sometimes directly from information he's got from sources. And sometimes it feels like it's predictive extrapolation, close to guesswork based on his long experience. This case, he actually pinned it down and said specifically that it was from the supply chain. And yet, no, this just, for once, it didn't ring true, because it's like you just said, there were the two parts of it. Orders have been cut, and it was because Apple Intelligence is not selling the iPhone. Apple Intelligence is not out yet. So that's just no. And the weird thing is, when I was looking into it to see what you said about cyclical stuff, do we get this every year? Yeah, we do. And also, last year or the year before, there's a line from Ming-Chi Kuo somewhere saying, this is nuts, all of this prediction of cuts and things. You can't know. So I think he was just having an off day. But I think it's interesting that when I have an off day, who cares? When he has an off day, I believe the share price of Apple went down a little bit.
The industry for random analysts saying things is drying up. Turns out it's not that hard to find out supply chain information. A lot of teenagers in China seem to be doing it and reporting on it on Weibo. So Ming-Chi Kuo is a bit of a dinosaur in the industry, and I feel like, especially given his last few reports, he's starting to feel the pressure to ramp things up or get out. And so if the best way to get attention in the Apple sphere is to be negative on Apple. It's the same route many publications take eventually. We saw this in the iPad mini reviews. It's fun to be mean to Apple because it gets you clicks. And I'm not accusing Ming-Chi Kuo of being unintelligent or being wrong. It's just he's specifically aiming his language at being negative in order to get more attention. I think it is accurate to say Apple slowed down orders of iPhone 16. Apple cut production of Apple Vision Pro. But the reasoning behind it is the problem. Apple is not cutting iPhone 16 supply because of bad sales. It's because their inventory is good enough. Tim Cook said it a while ago, and it still rings true. When you are a supply chain analyst and you are looking at the supply chain and you see how many displays are being ordered and use that as a metric to determine demand for iPhone, you're just doing it incredibly wrong. It tells you the smallest piece of the puzzle, and you do not have the big picture, and you have no idea what Apple's actually doing. I made the joke to William yesterday that Ming-Chi Kuo is describing a snake while filling the trunk of an elephant, right? He does not have the whole picture. He never has. he's been able to make good inferences from the perspective that he has before, but he does not have the holistic view of Apple's supply chain, so you cannot rely on him completely. And as we've seen every year, these kinds of reports are just wrong, and we'll see it again at the earnings call.
I saw an interview recently with Tim Cook where he was asked various things about his job, and one of the things was he ended up describing supply chain and actually described it as art when you see all these bits coming together. And I thought that was an interesting description of it, but also you could see the passion in it. This is someone whose background is in supply chain logistics for it, which, supply chain logistics sounds boring. Art sounds better. But Apple, and particularly Cook, are ruthlessly hot on making this work. I mean, we've mentioned examples before of Tim Cook personally making orders for booking freight for shipping the original iMac, booking it before they knew the iMac would be ready, and booking it in part so that rivals couldn't get that space on aircraft and things like this. So like the long game, spending the money, thinking about the chain. And then also somewhere along the way, I think maybe last year there was some similar story about this, and what I learned from it was that Apple will switch iPhone suppliers and component suppliers in a heartbeat if it gets a better deal somewhere else, or if like there were problems with BOE's displays, so they just switched them to Samsung. They go back and forth. Nothing is steady. It seems to me that the Apple Vision Pro has fewer suppliers, but the iPhone has so many options that no matter how good your sources are, you'd have to have lots of sources in different places. So why do we ever listen? I don't know.
It's a cottage industry. They really do make their money off of being as loud and controversial as possible. The Apple Vision Pro, though, I think it's doing fine. I believe this is doing exactly what Apple wants it to do. You can tell by the way Tim Cook talks about it. I know he's the CEO and he's supposed to say things, but it's still very positive. He's not hedging. He's not avoiding. He's strategically saying, in recent interviews, he's been on a kind of a little press tour in recent weeks, but he's discussed the Apple Vision Pro and basically said, yes, it is costly, but it is priced to match the concept. The Apple Vision Pro, as it exists today, is an early adopter product, and it is priced as such. That is the most blatant admittance that we've heard from Apple. I don't know if it was Tim Cook specifically, but it was an Apple executive that said it. It's obviously, yes, this is an expensive early adopter product, and it is going to lead to mass consumer products later, for sure. Like the Apple Vision Pro isn't over. This isn't some failed experiment. We will see the lower price model possibly early 2026. So I don't know. I find the doom and gloom always increasingly hilarious, because if you go back far enough, you can see it for almost every product line Apple's ever released. The Apple Watch was an abject failure, and yes, at least according to analysts, for months, if not a couple of years after its release, until it wasn't, and suddenly everyone's wearing them. AirPods, same deal. No one's buying AirPods anymore. Yeah, it's always been this weird cat and mouse game, and I never understand it.
Wes, well, I have an incredibly profound and deeply well thought out rebuttal to everything you've just said and how great analysts are, but that'll have to wait, because as we record this, that moment, you were in mid-sentence there when news came out from Apple. Greg Jaws, let's call him that, from Apple, has announced on Twitter that we have an exciting week of announcements ahead starting on Monday morning. Stay tuned. Now, I wonder what that could be. Going from the animated, what do you call it? It's not really a logo. Well, the animated animation that Greg has put out, it's clearly to do with the Mac, because there's the Finder.
Mac. Yeah.
The Happy Mac, yes. Oh, goes all the way back to Susan Care's original stuff in there. But this time, can we possibly work out what it could be? What do you think?
He said Mac your calendars. I feel like it's really specific on this one.
Yes, he did. I missed that. Right.
This is great. Well, we knew it was coming. I think they finally got tired of Mark Gurman leaking everything and just decided to announce something. A week of announcements starting Monday morning. So this sounds like Apple's going to pull what they did a couple of years ago, where Tim Cook just tweeted a picture of an iPad mini, and then like every day that week we got a new product. So we're expecting MacBook Pro, Mac Mini redesign possibly, and Mac Magic accessories with USB-C, possibly an M4 iMac. I believe that's the whole gamut. We'll see.
That's 4. I'm hoping for 5 things, unless you think Magic Keyboard on Tuesday, Magic Trackpad on Wednesday.
Right, one Magic accessory a day.
Yeah, that would work.
And then no Macs, actually, just Magic accessories.
But the iMac, now I'd heard rumours of the M4 MacBook Pro, and it's hardly a shock since the M4 is in the iPad Pro now. But I don't think I'd heard anything about an about an iMac coming. Do you think there's any possibility that not only will it be an M4 iMac, but a larger one? Have those been rumoured? Oh. Well, let me down gently. Okay.
It'll be a 24-inch iMac, honestly, maybe the same colors, just with an M4 chip. Nothing will change except for the chipset. Same thing for the MacBook Pro. Nothing will change. Maybe we'll get a little tweak here and there, but the design will be the same. This was later in the show notes, but since we have the announcement, we can talk about it here. The M4 Max and Magic accessories coming. Cool. I'm fully in the market for whatever accessories Apple has. I would like the miniature Mac Mini, but I don't necessarily need to buy it today. That'll probably be an early next year purchase for me, depending on finances. But it is definitely on the clock. My M1 Pro MacBook Pro gathering dust on the shelf could be replaced with something else to gather dust. So we'll see what they announce next week.
Do you know, I was feeling sorry for you because I was thinking you're engaged, you're going to be married next year. Very soon, the costs of weddings is horrendous. Your disposable income for Macs were going down. I was thinking, and then you had to do that crack about a Mac on the shelf. Well, fine.
Is that like Elf on a Shelf?
No. Okay.
No, okay.
Well, I have a question here, which is an exciting week of announcements. An iMac that looks the same as the last 2. A MacBook Pro that's identical. I'm not thrilled yet.
It's exciting for Apple because they don't have to be on the 3-nanometer process that they're deprecating.
Okay. That sounded so rude, but are they getting rid of the 3-nanometer? We're not on 2 nanometers yet.
No. They're on 3-nanometer. It's just a different process. The second generation nanometer process is poorly executed. It has a low yield rate, and it's costing money. Apple and TSMC both went away from it. That's why the M3 never had an Ultra chip. That's why M3 isn't an iPad Air. They want to get away from that chipset, and the only reason why the same process was used for the A17 Pro and the iPhone 15, the only reason why that chip is in the iPad Mini is because they had a bunch in a trash bin outside waiting around to get used, so they shoved them into the iPad Mini. But no, they do not want to be making this process anymore, so they're moving every Mac very quickly to M4, and that's why we're seeing this happen so fast.
Well, I knew about the bin of chips and that recycling is only collected on Fridays or something. But I'd missed everything about it being bad, the 3-nanometer.
It's not bad for the consumer. It's bad for Apple. They're losing money on this process. And I wouldn't say losing money. It's just it's not a desirable process. The next generation that they're using for the M4 chips, A18 Pro, the current generation of chips is more efficient, better all around for them, so they're moving everything to it very quickly. iPad Pro first, but then we're going to have a range of Macs now, and it looks like a range of Macs in the spring, followed by Ultra chips in the summer, and we will be fully away. But because M3 Ultra never existed, and the Pro Macs never, or the desktop Macs never got updated, by spring we will be done with M3 completely, and that is a very quick turnaround for an Apple chipset.
Yeah. I've got this image, and maybe somebody at Apple and somebody at TSMC, they took a longer lunch break than they should have done during the making of the first 3-nanometer thing.
Maybe the yield rates is why we have a bunch of A17 Pros with bin chips ready to go for the iPad Mini. Maybe think of it that way.
So they brought out the iPad Mini because, well, we've got to put it somewhere. Otherwise, they would have waited until they could have done an OLED screen for it next year or the year after.
So let's start from the top. Obviously, MacBook Pro with M4. Are you going to get one?
Probably not. I'm tempted by the Mac Mini. I've always fancied a Mac Studio, but my M1 devices are still doing so well. It's very hard to justify that kind of outlay, especially since I imagine I've got past the point where trading in an M1 would get me more than tuppence halfpenny for anything. Tuppence halfpenny is an English expression. Yes, at this point, it's best to keep them. People
should know what a tuppence is. Come on.
Yeah, okay. Tuppence halfpenny, I mean, it's a ridiculously archaic reference for a start. We went digital quite a while ago in our money. I think we're going off the line here. I'm sorry. Maybe we'll put this into an AppleInsider Plus thing. Or actually, AppleInsider Plus.
Mary Poppins? Yeah, that's it. Mary Poppins. There we go. Everyone's seen Mary Poppins.
Yes. Practically perfect film.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's a reference in there.
Writer. Yes. Right, okay. Totally off the track there. Tuppence only, work it back. You see this is happening live here. I love this is going on. We do seem to have gone crazily off the point, and there's a little bit of me that's wondering what in the world this chapter is going to be called in the podcast. It's like, do we have an image? Okay, I was thinking, is there a grab bag icon? If only we had Apple's image playground, and I could say, do me an apple-shaped grab bag something, and it would sort it out.
Well, don't derail just yet. Let's get through the event announcements first, because we might as well do this here. So,
yeah,
as we said, the MacBook Pros not redesigned, M4 chips. iMacs not redesigned, M4 chips. Not really for us. Mac Mini sounds interesting. We've discussed it before. No need to go into detail. It seems like it might be smaller, more hockey puck-like, more Apple TV-like. I'm very interested in that. I want to see what they do there. And then the thing I wanted to get to, because we've discussed those other three products before. We'll see if they get announced next week, and we'll talk about it on the next show. The Magic accessories. Are you interested at all in buying a new Magic Keyboard, Magic Trackpad, or Magic Mouse with USB-C?
No.
Okay.
Last year, I actually upgraded from the Magic Keyboard I had to one with Touch ID, and it was very expensive. So the idea of just chucking it away and getting another one.
There's been hope. I've seen whispers on the internet. Oh, what if they add, Touch ID to the trackpad, or what if they change this design? Don't expect anything. The code leaks from the other day around Magic accessories suggested that these new devices are still the Magic Mouse 2, the Magic Trackpad 2, and the Magic Keyboard. No nomenclature changes, which means very likely no feature changes. I would expect this is literally just USB-C and maybe some colorways, but nothing else.
I've got no problem with that. As you could say, I try a lot of different keyboards. I love keyboards. I've been using a Logitech one for a little while now, and I love the feel of it, but I keep coming back to the Apple's Magic Keyboard because it's just, for me, it feels like the perfect balance of travel and speed. So I look at the keyboard in front of me now and I can't see what you would change to make it better, but then maybe that's why I'm not employed by Apple. So, okay.
Well, go ahead.
Are you a trackpad or a mouse kind of guy? I don't know if I've ever asked.
1,000%.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Once you go trackpad,
shorter conversation than I thought. That's what I think. But there are people who've gone the other way. Madness, all of it. But anyway, let's say probably by Thursday we will have the option of new. There's no chance they'll do them in different colours, is there?
No.
Something I'm tempted.
I would still buy black anyway, so it's pointless.
Okay, you actually got to say, you're Mr. Doom and Gloom here. I'm excited for a new keyboard. You're saying it's the same. A new colour, it's the same. A new mat, it's the same. Okay, but so actually, this exciting announcement is getting less and less exciting every time.
It'll be great for people who need to upgrade or buy new computers, but that brings my next point, and I know you're in charge this week, but I'm hijacking. I want to get to 18.2, but I think we can close there because another product.
Actually, I really, really want to ask you about 18.2 for reasons I would explain, but
right.
Now I've got to know what's the other product.
Well, so we're discussing a range of Mac products that are probably going to get a chipset update. The Mac Mini aside, because that has been long overdue. Gosh, when was the Mac Mini introduced with this design? 2008. We're well past needing a redesign of that computer, so that's exciting. Cool. The iMac and the MacBook Pro will probably be identical, maybe some tweaks. We'll see what Apple does there. But I bring this up because we've seen the iPad Mini 7 reviews. Mine is literally arriving as we record. I'm sure there will be a knock on my door and I will have to leave the podcast to go get it. I'm excited to play with this thing. We discussed it last week, the commentary around it and A17 Pro and why it's important that it's getting this chipset and my issue with people's commentary. Well, the reviews, they were hit and miss. There's good reviews and bad reviews, as there always is with Apple products. And I wanted to segue here because it is just like the MacBook Pro and iMac, a product that has no external design changes but a new chipset. And I am anticipating, and I wonder if you agree, William, a very stark difference in how people discuss these products versus the iPad Mini.
Oh. Why do you think that?
I don't know. I for some reason, if I had to put it to words, it's the Mac is this old, mature device that nobody expects anything fancy from. So when Apple does do anything exceptional and out of the way to upgrade it or redesign it, it is a true surprise. But the iPad, especially with the recent redesign of the larger iPad Pros, the iPad still feels like a device that has room to grow and change and evolve over time. So when the iPad Mini did not get changed, it was a disappointment versus it's an expectation that the MacBook Pro won't change year over year or every couple of years. So the same design that we got when it was redesigned a couple of years ago won't bother people as much. So when they do discuss this device that literally is just a chipset update, they will not be using the same negative language that they use when discussing the iPad Mini.
Okay, I think you're right. I see the logic there. I'm trying to work out whether you've just insulted the Mac or not, because I mean that could be fighting talk there.
No, it's a mature, very good elderly product. No, I'm joking. It is the Mac is excellent. Obviously, it's the truck we all need, but there's not much. The form factor has been figured out. I think human ergonomics, like these things, have decided what a laptop looks like. They've decided what a desktop looks like, a display with no borders. There's only so much you can do. And the iPad Mini has room for improvement. It could have moved to OLED. It could have gotten thinner bezels. It could have had a thinner chassis or a lighter case. It already weighs 0.6 pounds. It weighs almost nothing. But people had expectations, and Apple didn't do that. Instead, they made it faster, gave it, better processing, better gaming, and tackled jelly scrolling, which we can discuss if you want to. But this whole discussion around it I just find very funny because you can look at two different product lines and the way people talk about a Mac with an identical design and a new chipset being, oh yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to get the M4 MacBook Pro. It's going to be so great for my workflows. Can't wait for that extra power and the features of that. Wi-Fi 7, woohoo. Look at iPad Mini. Wow, Apple doesn't even care about the iPad Mini or iPad Mini users. They're awful, and they basically threw away this product. It's a throwaway product. We have to wait 3 more years for an update. My goodness. And it's just like, why? I get it, but also it's just, I'm personally excited for the iPad Mini. I think it was a good update. I don't think it's a great update. Like, I would have been happier with more upgrades, but it makes sense for what it is, for what they did. I don't know. Maybe I'm too forgiving.
I hear you. You're saying Mac users are sensible people and iPad users aren't. That's what I'm hearing there.
I mean, I can agree with that, actually. The iPad users are the ones trying to bend over backwards to make things happen on a device Apple clearly doesn't want it to happen on. So,
I thought you'd throw something at me for that, but okay. All right.
No, we know we're crazy. It's fine.
Okay.
Steve Jobs praised us. Here's to the crazy ones. And here we are.
Right. Oh, so now you're trying to own the craziness.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. Well, I want a bit of the craziness. Come on. Okay. Crazy but not weird. Let's not go there. In this, it feels like we're touching on some of the things that we wanted to talk about in AppleInsider Plus, this thing of how much further can you go. So let's park that for a second and come back to a thing that I want to ask you about, and you mentioned.
Well, I had one last little mention. I know I keep derailing.
Yeah.
The iPad Mini.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah.
So So the iPad Mini, I wanted to bring up. Go check out the reviews. There are some good reviews. I just found a couple of them almost insulting. One in particular, people might know the one I'm referencing. Basically, from a reputable publisher, basically said these brain dead iPad Mini users will buy anything, and Apple's just shoveling them garbage, and they're willing to go pick it up, and Apple's just taking advantage of them spending their money. It's just like, good Lord, the negativity, that the stance that they took on this device. But anyway, I wanted to point out something we didn't get to last week, another advantage of the iPad Mini, and why this update is important. First of all, it shows that Apple is still committed to updating the iPad Mini, that there is an inevitable next generation coming with OLED. We've seen rumors of that already this week. But also, for accessibility reasons, this is the lightest iPad. It is bigger than an iPhone, has a larger display than an iPhone, but it is still much smaller than any other iPad. It is almost half the weight of any other iPad. And you have this fantastic display. I know it's not OLED. I know it's not fast refresh rate, but it is this large, bright display. When you compare it to an 11-inch with the newer displays, yes, it gets brighter and everything. But again, this device, being the price that it is, the size that it is an accessibility standpoint. It is excellent for users. And I want everyone to go read, I wanted to bring this up, go read Stephen Aquino's review of the iPad Mini over on Forbes. He discussed some of the accessibility features, and another user who is nonverbal who uses the iPad Mini to communicate. And it's just excellent. It is the perfect pocketable drawing, note-taking, writing device. It is a lot of things, but I just wanted to, again, attest to the fact that this is not some garbage throwaway update that Apple is insulting its users with, that there are people who are getting benefits, that any update that improves the processing power of this device makes a difference. Or you can now increase the storage, or it's double the storage at the same base price, right? These things are important to users, and I think we forget that when we're discussing these products.
I am actually entirely on your side on this. But let's pretend for a moment that I'm not, because I'm just going to say to you, jelly scrolling, why didn't they fix that?
Oh.
Or did they fix it? Because I'm hearing yes and no on this.
Okay, so this is so silly. It is a physics problem. We've discussed this before. All displays do it. They all do it. You don't notice it as much in certain areas because you can actually account for it and directly oppose it. It's like... I'll go electrical for a minute. When you're designing a generator, you can use windings to oppose your electrical force, basically, to make up for different losses. The same thing can be done in a display. You can make up for the jelly scrolling where the refresh rate on the left side versus the right side is mismatched. And you can make up for it in software. You can make up for it using higher refresh rate displays. That's why on the iPad Pro, you're never going to notice jelly scrolling, because to the naked eye, it's not happening. But if you get a fast enough camera on that display, it is happening, I promise. The iPad Mini just happens to be a 60 frames per second refresh rate. I get it. We've talked about this before. Maybe at this point, it would be beneficial to move to 90 or 120 on iPad Mini. I don't know. We'll see if Apple ever does it. I personally don't notice jelly scrolling, nor do I notice the 60 frames, but that's a different story entirely. Apple did something to address the jelly scrolling. It is better. If you put them side by side, you can see videos of this now. I don't have mine on hand, but it is magnitudes better on the iPad Mini, generation over generation. So that is now accounted for, but it is still present. So if you take a super fast camera and point it at it, you can say, yeah, look, jelly scrolling's still there. That's why you're seeing conflicting reports. Apple did account for it and make it basically unnoticeable to the naked eye. But if you point a fast enough camera at any display, you will find evidence of it. So take that for what you will. But I think it was important that Apple addressed it because people were complaining about it. I was never personally affected by it, but hey, kudos. I'm glad it's addressed.
I can't actually count the number of times I've looked at my iPad through a slow motion camera. So I'm relieved to hear this. I just like the name Jelly Scroll. Really, that's why I threw it at it. This episode is brought to you by 1Password. Quick question. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? Yeah, I didn't think so. So my next question is, How do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has the answer to this question: extended access management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at onepassword.com/AppleInsider-podcast. That's onepassword.com/AppleInsider-podcast. And thanks to 1Password for supporting the Apple Insider Podcast. But, okay, hang on. This is the thing I actually... Every week there's something I want to ask you about because I know you'll know it. And usually it's because you've got something in your background or I happen to know you've used something already. This time I'm asking you out of frustration because Apple Intelligence, the beta 18.2 is out, and somewhere in the notes, instead of the thing where it's been saying for months now that you have to set your language to English US and Siri to English US, it's saying English UK is doable. I'm in the UK, I switched to that, and I've got it. It's coming as Apple Intelligence, and there's bits going on, but everything I want to do, say, with trying out the image stuff, is I have to request. I have to be on the wait list for Apple Intelligence. And that happened before, earlier on in the beta process, and I signed up and I was through the wait list in 10 minutes or something. It's now been about 20 hours. And it seems to me that everyone else got the image playground except me.
Yes.
Have you got the image playground?
So you have access to Apple Intelligence. You just do not have access to Image Playground. Right. I didn't know whether there was anything else, like Genmoji and stuff. Anything image related I don't have. That's all related to one app called Image Playground. It's just hidden in different ways across the system. Right. Yes, I'm also on the wait list. Many people are getting added over time. It seems to be taking time. It's now about 24 hours in, and we're still on this wait list. Whatever, I'm sure they're doing it by region or it's random number selectors. Who knows? Apple just doesn't want to overload their servers. Remember, some of this stuff, especially image generation, is probably being done with private cloud compute. So even though on device can be done, Apple wants it all to be working perfectly. So just in case people are going to send it to the server, they need to be ready for it. So that's why this is going to be such a slow rollout. By next podcast, we should both be on the actual, be able to use it. If not, there's probably an issue with the rollout or something. But anyway, yeah, this was expected. It's going to take time. I'm very interested in playing with this, but the images I've seen some commentary on it. They're ugly, and I kind of agree. Yeah. They remind me of early ChatGPT style, kind of muddy cartoon characters. But at the same time, it's weird. It looks like it's on purpose. I think Apple is very specifically stylizing them because if you go back a year or so to when ChatGPT was still in its early days and it was making these kinds of images where it's multiplying fingers, anytime it was a cartoon character, it looked like these kind of blobby, Pixar-y adjacent characters. But they were still very inconsistent. The style could be random from scene to scene. Apple, though, from what I've noticed, is very consistent. So they seem to have nailed down a very specific style and are only using that style. It reminds me a lot of Personas on Apple Vision Pro. They nailed down the style, and then a couple of updates later, they improved on the style. So I think this is just the version 1, what they're allowing their generative AI to do, and we'll see them eke in its ability to generate more representational images over time with better sharpness and better art styles anyway over time. This is just day 1, and yes, I think they're a little ugly and maybe not too useful. As far as I'm talking specifically about the ones where you take an image of yourself and make a Genmoji or whatever. It's very specific. Apple seems to have dialed it in versus when ChatGPT and Google was doing this in early days. You could just specify an art style and it would try its best to mimic it.
I'm surprised to say it's the image of yourself that I'm interested in, because I remember Memoji when that all started out. I spent a while doing that kind of police identikit thing of swapping eye size and hair size, and I never got anything that seemed to me to look anything like me. So the idea of saying, go on then, you have a go, see how well you do, that oddly appealed to me, but now you're kind of putting me off again.
Yeah, luckily these are ugly enough that we're not going to see a bunch of like social media avatars.
There's a joke there. I know there's a joke there, but we'll move on. Okay. As this episode first goes out, incidentally, I'm speaking at the Stratford Literary Festival here in the UK, and one of the things that we're talking about is how, as writers, no matter what we write, it actually reveals the writer as well as anything else that they're trying to convey. On that thought, you have created a picture of a dinosaur in an Apple store, and I'd like you to walk me through your thinking, plus also actually how you did it. I assumed it was Image Playground, but it obviously isn't. No. Why did you do this, and how did you do this?
Okay, well, this technology's been around forever. You can just go to GPT's website or download its app, OpenAI's product, and tell it to generate an image, and it will. Same thing for Microsoft Copilot, except Copilot will do Mickey Mouse smoking a cigar. ChatGPT will not. Fine. It works. This is something we've been able to do for a while, but the difference here and the reason why this image is here, and I'm sure we'll probably use it for our art for this chapter, it's ChatGPT being told to generate it through Siri. So that's the difference. Yes, we've all been able to make these images, but now uniquely, this was a image created through the Siri interface on an iPhone. Me saying, my command was, if I remember it exactly, ask ChatGPT to generate an image of a dinosaur working in an Apple store using an anime noir effect. And this is what it came out as. I don't see the anime part of it, but they definitely nailed the dingy kind of noir feel. Yeah.
Okay. Right. I'm just looking at the image again. Nothing I can usefully say about that except, interesting.
It's literally AI slop. There's a word for it now in social media. It's everywhere. It's garbage. Like, you don't really use it for anything. It's kind of a neat moment. You can have fun with it. As much as I talk about how useless these things are, and I still think that they are useless, they are still interesting and can be used for entertainment. Those are two different qualifiers. They're not this is using the technology poorly. I don't think generating images from nothing or generating text from nothing is actually that useful. And now we're generating video. I've seen some of these guys are getting good at making video from AI. Fine. It's not going to replace human created art or writing or anything like that. And I think that's why Apple's taken such a specific stance on this. Even Apple's tool, Image Playground, yes, you can generate an image from nothing, or you can use your photos as a baseline, but there's no realistic images. They still want you to go take photos. Craig Federighi made it very clear. We are committed to realistic photography and art. This tool, like Genmoji and Image Playground, is for entertainment value. You're in a conversation and you're like, ooh, wouldn't it be funny if I had a perfect meme to encapsulate this conversation, and you just dump some of the chat into the Image Playgrounds and it pops out the perfect image. That's what it's being used for. It is not being used really. I know OpenAI and Google want you to think this, but it is not actually being used to create useful, real human content. It just isn't. So going into ChatGPT and asking for a dinosaur and killing the planet slightly faster is something you can do on iOS 18.2, but it is also entirely optional.
So really, basically, no one would use that image as podcast artwork. No.
It's not like we would have hired someone to. So this is the distinction. If we thought, wouldn't it be great to have podcast art of a dinosaur working in an Apple store, and then go hire someone to make that for us, but instead we use the AI tool to generate it, and now we're no longer paying that artist. Yes, that would be bad, but we were never going to hire anyone to make this piece of art. It kind of goes back to the argument of piracy. So I don't know if you've heard this before, William, being in some part of this industry. Have you heard the discussion? I think it's actually very valid, that piracy is mostly harmless because the people who tend to pirate content never would have purchased it in the first place.
Oh, right. Mm, yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand the argument is flawed, but even the industry has acknowledged that they don't lose that much money on piracy because the people who are going to buy it will buy it anyway, or the people who pirate it might be inspired to get a better version and then pay money for it, right? I know that's a pro-piracy argument, and that's used kind of to try and derail it, but I do find some valid, like, argument there. That said, the people who are using these tools would never have paid an artist. The guy who's making an app in his bedroom and needs an app icon was never going to pay an artist to create an app icon. They'll just ask ChatGPT to do it. Is that terrible? Yes, but also it's a sign of our economy and how much money people have to actually do these things. Everyone should be getting paid to create, absolutely. But sadly, the world that we live in doesn't support that all the time. And I think, getting back to the iPad mini discussion, we also forget that these tools are also an incredible accessibility feature. If you want to be an artist and have something in your head that you want to see and have no way to create it yourself, or have some inability to do so, being able to tell a generator what you want to see and then you're able to see it is a huge accessibility win as well. So it's difficult to just classify this kind of stuff as an abject failure of humanity, but I will argue that we're mostly using it wrong, and I think Apple's implementation is still spot on for what we actually need from generative technologies.
I see your logic, but I raise you, the existence of things like this, I think, devalues artwork of any description. We've had this in writing. There are services where, should you need, I don't know, a press release written, you can go on a service and you can put a bid out and writers will compete to basically get the job. And what this has ended up doing is guaranteeing that people are undercutting each other. They're doing it for pence instead of whatever they actually need to make a living from.
It undervalues real art, yes.
It does, but then there's the knock-on effect that the people who have hired like this, they get the rubbish you would expect, and they conclude, we don't need writers are rubbish, and they go off doing it themselves. So somewhere down the line, an actual writer is losing out. And unfortunately, this week, there's a similar thing that's gone on. ITV, the terrestrial network station here in the UK, has put out a job advert. It's described, I can't remember what the title is, but they want someone to shape the future of content creation. And it is explicitly, head of generative AI innovation. Yes. And it is to create content for TV shows and films. So, but they're going to pay £95,000 to this person who's going to rock up, type a prompt into ChatGPT, and I don't know what they're going to do for the rest of the time.
And then they're going to generate garbage, and they're going to lose a lot of money, and then they're going to fire that person.
Yes, but that person will get at least £95,000 out of it, where a writer will not.
I agree.
And
this is sadly, this is a whole nother podcast, but long story short, I've mentioned it briefly here before in Mastodon. All these companies, all these tools are overpromising. They're going to change the world. They're going to replace your jobs. They're going to kill humanity. They're not. They're just not. They're not intelligent. They can't reason. They can't think. They're just poor. And they're slop. And everyone's tired of it. Humanity's already revolting against it. And these companies thinking they're saving $1 are going to hurt themselves in the long run or go bankrupt trying to rely on these technologies where humans were necessary. It's going to hurt a lot of people in the short term, and I hate that, but it will all shake out in the end because people are going to eventually realize, including those stupid companies hiring people to do stupid things, will eventually realize, oh, this is actually just a hammer, and a hammer cannot replace a construction worker, right? So... We'll get there. It's slow and steady. But I do want to point out something that I would never pay anyone money for. I asked, so we were talking before about generative images. I haven't been able to test Apple's yet, but there are some things that are new that I have been able to test in 18.2 that is related to Apple Intelligence.
Intrigued. Yes.
So the writing tools has a new prompt area.
Oh, yes. I did not know that. Yes.
So if you open writing tools and you select text, you'll get the proofread function, the rewrite function, and business, personal, whatever. There's a new text field where you can say, this is how I want you to rewrite it. And it is everything you could dream of in this silliness.
Sorry, finally, I could say, instead of professional and friendly or concise, write it in a threatening way. We can actually do that. Excellent. All right. They listened.
Yeah, or more urgently, or with more gravitas, or as a Shakespearean play.
Sweary. Okay, right, I'm going off on one now. Yes.
So
I bet that one won't work, but it's worth a try. Might have a go at it, just in the privacy of my own home, obviously.
I think
it'll
do swears. You cannot make it do anything like erotic or anything like that, because Apple specifically said you have to write that and then we can edit it for you, but we're not going to generate that for you.
Right.
I still find it funny that they had to make that disclaimer, but they did.
Yes.
Humans, we're fun. So the thing is it's not generating anything technically. It is generating something. So this is generative technology. It's Apple's intelligence, but you still have to start with something. So I had a note I took a few months ago. I can't remember why, but I wrote down this kind of social media diatribe of, God, I hate it so much. People are complaining about Apple all the time, but honestly, I think it was kind of a thought process of, is the walled garden and reality distortion field an inverse of what it used to mean? Is it that Apple users are trapped in this walled garden and can't see how bad it is on the outside anymore? Right? Like, I was thinking of it that aspect, and just kind of like taking notes and wanted to do a blog post about it or whatever. It never went anywhere. I might eventually write a blog post about it, but this text, I want to say a few paragraphs long, I highlighted it and said, make it into a Shakespearean play. And it said Act 1, Scene 1, and gave me a list of characters, and then had them act out scenes based on this silly little diatribe. And then I was like, okay, do a limerick, do a poem. It would transform it however I wanted it to. It was doing what I was asking. So I wanted to read a little bit of a poem that it put out. I wonder if you'll enjoy this.
Right. I'm just remembering that I'm the one who edits this podcast, so if there's a sudden lurch now. I'm sorry, carry on.
Oh no, we lost the audio. It's gone forever. No, it is actually really terrible. I posted it on Mastodon, but it's just interesting now that Apple's doing this. You could always do this with ChatGPT. You can do whatever you want with these tools. It's just interesting seeing how Apple handles these kinds of queries. So,
okay, you built it up. We're ready.
Oh, no,
Apple
it's terrible.
Poetry Slam. Off you go.
Not to defend, not to downplay, but have you pondered, come what may, the Apple walled garden, a term of scorn, or reality distortion field, forlorn? Perhaps it works both ways, a bitter truth. Apple users in their perfect youth, living within their manicured walls, while Apple royalty from their high calls. Enjoy the tea, they whisper with a smile. The world outside is a vile, wild style. We stomp and cry over every slight, wishing to escape into the fading light, unaware that the injustices we bear are paper cuts compared to the world's despair. Leave the walls and businesses decay. Google erases without word to say. Meta cancels livelihoods they seize. Development on other platforms teases. With a hellscape of confusion and despair, we cling to Apple beyond compare. Perhaps we're spoiled in our illusion's sway, shocked when Apple acts like any other day. Breaking the spell of perfect rulers high, on the walled garden's lament, we softly sigh.
There's a line in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, isn't there, about how I like that poem. I like the way it undercut the surrealism of the underlying metaphor. Actually, ages ago now, I went to support a friend who was producing a poetry slam, and I mean, I love reading poetry. I haven't gone to slams before, and I don't usually write it, but I was there early because it was a friend. I was seeing her, and she was working, and she actually got me on stage before the audience came in to read my one and only poem for the purpose of the judges to use as like a litmus test. They took me as like the base marker for it. So I got 1 out of 10, but at least they knew everybody else after they kind of grade evenly for it. Not going to say what I thought about your score.
Oh, I didn't write it. It's awful. Yeah, no, it's very silly, but at the same time, because I know what the original text looks like, it's funny how it took that and turned it into that. Like, it's, my goodness. At least it rhymed, more or less.
Yeah, yes. So,
It definitely failed on a couple of points to try and it went out of its way to make a rhyme without making sense, right? Like Wild Style. I don't know where that came from, or just I had to laugh at the Google phrase of just out in the world there is decay. Just Google making businesses disappear or something. It was just very silly to me. It was a good laugh out loud moment anyway.
I'm reasonably sure my sister doesn't listen to this podcast, so I'll just tell you anyway. Long time ago, when she was a teacher, she showed me a piece of writing one of her pupils had done and how good it was. And it was, 10 out of 10 or whatever the star rating was. And all the way through, there are all these ticks. And I'm reading it and I think, this is just so boring. And I start going, in the end, I give up. What is so good at it? And she said, well, look, there's a metaphor. There's a simile. That's spelt correctly. All the surface stuff was there, but it was, think of the worst word you can say on a podcast. That's not where I was going, but Solus will take it. I might prefix that with other words. I'm very sweary today. I don't know why. Yes, Solus. That's a perfect phrase chosen by a man who's a writer. See what I did there for it? Yeah.
Yeah. See, the thing it generated was a poem. You could probably classify it as a poem, but it didn't have a proper narrative, and it didn't understand what was being conveyed. It was just making words rhyme in order, and fine. It had a cadence to it, so it landed the central tenets of being a poem, but it lacked humanity. It was terrible. It was but it doesn't help that the content was incredibly boring. I think we had a funnier one that I didn't save, but it was almost comedic, like talking about the Queen of Apple and all of this silly stuff. It was so funny, but I know where it's coming from because it's generative, so it's using all this information to output a thing. And I know everyone's had these discussions a year ago about these other tools that other companies have made. I just find it interesting that Apple is in this field. Again, it didn't give me that text off of a prompt. I wrote a bunch of stuff down, and it took it and created something from it. Or you could ask for a summary of it or get bullet points. There's a lot of ways that this can be useful. And just because we used it as a toy just now, I have been using Apple's writing tools as actual tools. So not to downplay that importance. I want to emphasize again, there are ways you can use any tool, especially Apple Intelligence, as toys and simple, laughs. But I think I have seen Apple's things so far actually make a difference. And Tim Cook said in an interview that Apple Intelligence has already made a positive impact in his life, and he gets a lot of time saved from summaries, and he uses the other tools throughout his day. He actually also said, I think in a similar interview, that he uses every Apple product every day, which I find astonishing.
Yes, all 4 different versions of AirPods or something. But you're saying that about the Queen of Apple. You've actually put Bruce Springsteen's Queen of the Supermarket in my head, and I frankly may never forgive you for it. So on that bombshell, there is one last thing. It popped into my head because while we were talking about this, the event was announced. Apple has said this thing directly, a week of announcements, and I unthinkingly assume that meant 5 days. We'll find out. But isn't next week when Apple Intelligence is supposed to roll out officially, publicly as well? So when is that going to fit into
Monday.
Friday? Oh, okay. Well, we went opposite ends of the week there. It's the 28th year. I know that now I've said it aloud, that date has been mentioned. But it feels like a curious day to do a big Apple Intelligence launch and a new Mac. I can't wait to see what happens.
Well, we also have earnings call. Maybe that's one of their announcements, is that they made a bunch of money. Every day doesn't have to be a product. Tim Cook just announced that he found a really nice pair of shoes.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, yes. If somebody wants to comment on your poetry or your
is not
choice
my
of what's
poetry.
excitement, yeah, you keep saying that. Where can people find you to hunt you down?
Right, to tell me how terrible that was. I agree. No, please, it was awful. I put you through a terrible thing. No, I'm on Mastodon. of course, as Hilly Tech, always there rambling. You might see me putting out some generative images very soon once I get access to Apple's image playground. Very interested to see. This will be the first technology of Apple having something generate something from almost nothing. I think there's still some inputs involved from your data set. But in any case, that will be fun. We didn't get a chance to talk about visual intelligence, but I've been experimenting with that. Very cool little feature. I think that's going to be a big game changer for iPhone 16 users. But you can also find me on Apple Insider. To get my email from any article I've written, you can click my name and it will open a box. You can send me an email and tell me what you think. I actually checked our podcast feed yesterday. I will check it again now while I'm speaking and delay as I continue to click around. Open the app.
So actually, while you do that, I can tell you, after I updated to iOS 18.2, the beta one, I had to take a photograph of something, a work thing. And instead of taking the photograph, it flew off into Apple Intelligence and was trying to tell me what this thing was I was looking at. In an untidy desk, it said. But now I want to do it. I've tidied the desk and I want to do it again. I can't make it happen. So
I want to put with that. I'll put this tidbit here. First of all, there's no new podcast reviews, so go out there and give us a review. We will read it here, and I always appreciate the reviews. We've got some good ones recently. But yes. I wanted to point out, the visual intelligence is cool. I'll throw this in as the last. If you've made it this far into the show, it's a bonus.
Yes, and a miracle. But also, yes,
I wanted to point out, Apple Intelligence has made me use ChatGPT for the first time, and it's making me actually use it because, and I believe it, and you have to have some level of belief here, it is private. They are not getting my information. They don't get to know who asked these queries. They don't get to keep the data. They're not using any of my data to train their data. Apple made using ChatGPT bearable on a moral standpoint from my point of view. And so when I open Visual Intelligence and take a photo of my office and get this quaint description from ChatGPT of what it's looking at, it's like, that's cool. Or open the Google search. Again, no data is shared, no data is kept by Google, but it's a straight button press, image capture, Google image search. Here's the product, where you can buy it, what it is. That is so handy. That is it. Apple needs to make 50 ads about this. Visual intelligence is huge, but we didn't get to talk about it today.
Well, back to the point of where people can find us about these things. I'm actually in the middle of launching a whole new section on my YouTube channel, so I'm a bit busy over there on 58 Keys on YouTube. But the rest of the time, I'm glued to the Mac, waiting for me to be accepted into Apple Intelligence. So William at AppleInsider.com is a fine way to reach me. And actually, thank you for some of the fun, nutty emails we're getting in the last week or two. I'm a bit behind replying, but I love them. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Also, thank you very much to 1Password, a sponsor for this week. I really like that app. I've been using it for so long. It's great that they're supporting us, so thank you, 1Password. And if you're a paid subscriber, please hang around for what I think in comparison will be a very chaos-free Apple Insider Plus. But in the meantime, otherwise, speak to you next week.
I don't know. Apple Insider Plus might have a poem about Apple's future. We'll find out. But you'll have to pay to see, right? We'll talk next week.